Alright guys, I'm back on MaterialUI. So we're going to cover the second part of the MaterialUI, which is continuing to build on this theme on this theme right here. So now that you have the palette already created, let's talk a little bit about the typography and what is going to be needed there. So and what is this for? So basically you have several ways to use typography, and I use it for mainly for just I let what do you call it, MaterialUI kind of do all the typography for me. But there are a few things that I don't really like about MaterialUI, and I think it's their headings. Their H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. I think it's incredibly large. I mean, like large. It is stupid large. So if I go to the typography here and customization, I should be able to go down to see it somewhere. Okay, where is it? Oh, come on. I know you have it. Seriously? Or is it somewhere else? Maybe it's in the components. Let's try the components. Typography. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Alright, so this is what MaterialUI uses out of the box for, for your components, okay? And they use Roboto. So they use Roboto, and this is what you do. So if you want to use it, if you use typography H1, you get a heading this large. If you use typography H2, you get a heading this large, and like that. And then this is the kind of one you get for H6, and for the subtitle 1, subtitle 2, body 1. There should be a body 2. Yep, body 2. If you want to create a piece of text that mimics the same content, the same letters or font style as the button, you use that one. For caption and overline. Alright, so I think this is incredibly large, and I don't really like it, and I don't want to just say, well, then don't use it. If you like this size, then just use the H4 instead. Well, yes, but for SEO purposes, and I think that's still relevant. The H1 and the headings are still relevant for SEO purposes. But and if it changed, hey, you guys tell me then. You guys should be able to tell me in the comments if heading sizes is no longer an SEO thing. But last I checked, it is. Last I checked, you need to have an H1 at the top of your page that kind of talks about like what is the actual page about and things like that. So if it forces you to use an H1 and an H2 and then a couple of H3 and H4s to have the right SEO on it, then imagine I'm gonna have to use the H1, and and if I don't style it my way, I'm gonna have to use this damn huge H1. So I don't like it. So that's what I use typography for, basically, to make sure that I restyle these H1 tags and also define which kind of font family I'm going to be using. So for font family, we'll start with that. So for font family, I'm going to start up typing font family and create an array in there that is going to use and in that array I'm going to declare any kind of font that I want to use. Okay, and they're all going to come from Google fonts. So I have Barlow here, and another one that I'm going to be using is going to be Oswald, and another one that I'm going to be using is going to be Anton. Don't get too creative with this and start adding unnecessary amount of fonts, because they do add bloat to the site. So just keep the ones that you're going to use, and then once you're done designing your website and you decide that what, Oswald was never really used, or Anton or whoever, you can just come back here and delete it. I think it'll be better. So now that you have all of these, and then the last thing you're going to do is just add at the end and the join. Okay, that's all you need. And I'm going to put a comma here because I am going to keep adding more properties to this. So now it's time to actually talk about the actual tags. So I'm going to modify my H1. Copy that. save a bunch, and my H2, my H3, H4, H5, H6. Okay, that should give me, yeah, actually, you know what, I'm gonna leave the H5 and H6 the way they are. I think they look pretty good the way they are. But I do want to do something to the H1, H2, H3, and H4. And now the one thing that I want to use to them is I want to change the size and I want to change the weight. Okay, I think they're a little too light for my taste. They need to be a little bit thicker, especially if I'm going to be using Barlow, and they are a little bit more, they're different than this right here. This is Roboto, so it's going to look a little different, a little thinner too, I think. So how do you change the properties in here? So technically speaking, if you use CSS, you will use something like this, for like font, weight, I don't know, and then 500. This is CSS, right? Well, the theme, this doesn't use CSS, okay? This uses a different syntax in order to add properties, to add values to this property. So this property and this value is completely wrong, and the syntax to do it is you need to what's called camel casing. So you need to font weight, and if it's a number and you want to keep it as an integer, you just keep it like that, and then you keep a comma here. But if you want to use it as a string, you can also do that as well, but this will read this font weight as a string, not as a integer, and it needs to be an integer, so keep it as an integer. Okay, so that's a font weight, and then I want to use a font size, so I'm gonna use that camel casing as you saw. And then again, there are two ways that you can do this. You can make it like that, and it will work. It would automatically know that this is pixels that you're looking for, and that's great. Or you could make it a string and make it 60 pixels, and it will take it just the same. The reason why this won't take the string is because font weight doesn't go by pixels or anything like that. It just goes by amount of weight thickness that you want to use to the, I guess it's like a vectorized weight. So if you look at the browser and you inspect the code on your site, you're gonna see that font weights, then they never have like inches at the end, you know, like that. They never have inches or pixels or EMs or REMs. It doesn't have any of that. It's just like that. So that's why it's always going to be an integer. But in this case, font size, they could be pixels, but it could also be 60 inches. It could also be 60 rem. I mean, this would be huge if it was 60 rem, like that. So we're going to use pixels and like that. So now the default is pixels. So if I do this, it will automatically go to 60 pixels. I like doing this better. I think this is a lot cleaner, and it already knows, so I'll keep it that way. Alright, so now that I have that, I'm going to come over here and basically do it. Oops, what did I do? Put it on the wrong spot. There you go. And do it to all of my guys here. Save that so it can prettier can do this thing. Let me just put this down. And now I'm gonna change the H2. Keep it the same size as an H1. I like to keep my H2 and my H1 the same size. That way I can use them interchangeably if I want to, but I can only use H1 once because I think that for SEO purposes you're only allowed to have one H1 per page. So that way I can still use more and mimic the H1, but not really using more H1s, if that makes any sense. Don't worry about that. Now for the H3, I kind of like the size that they have in here. This is a good size for H3, I think, especially in Barlow. So I am going to keep the font size that comes out of the box, but change the font weight. And for the H4, same thing. Just changing the font weight, keeping the size they have. And that's about it. That's pretty cool right there. Alright, so that takes care of my typography. And you can do more. There's a lot more that you can change. So if you want to change the body one, you can change, you can change any of these variants. Okay. All right. So the overrides. So the overrides is a tricky one because the override is what actually overrides the particular element of each component that you have. Okay, but in order to override a component, you kind of need to know what name this component is Material UI. I mean, what's the name that the Material UI is given to each component individually. So if I look at the button here, just go to the button, and you see my primary button here. If I look at and I inspect it, you can see here that there is a class called Material MUI button label, right? Or MUI button in this case, actually. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. So here, the button. This is what I'm looking at. MUI button base root, MUI button root, and then MUI button contain and contain primary. So all of this stuff means something. Okay, so I'm gonna just double click on that and copy, actually, because I want you to look at this, and just gonna keep it down here as a reference. I'm gonna keep these down here. Please don't run this. This is not gonna run. This is just a comment for myself. In fact, I should just probably comment it. Alright, so I'm just going to comment this out just in case I end up saving by accident. And I don't actually save it. Alright, so what you're going to do here in the override, if I wanted to change the override, if I wanted to override my button, okay, I have to realize one thing here. So basically you can see that one thing in common about this, actually you probably would never need to do anything to the base, but you see here one thing in common. They have an MUI button, all of it in common. That's the actual name of the component, all right, the class that they're adding to the component. So I'm going to start off with that, and I'm going to put MUI button. Now the good thing about, again, this Visual Studio Code is, so look at this. If I ever have a doubt, I'm like, oh my god, how do I do the badge, for example? Well, there it is. It's already kind of giving you, say, are you talking about the badge? Or the card? So in this case, it's the button. So here we go. MUI button. So I'm going to use the MUI button, right? And then in the MUI button, to the button, I see that that button is a contained button. Okay, there are different kinds of buttons. There are buttons that are contained, some are flat. Let me show you what I mean. So these are contained buttons. That's why it has that contained class. And then these are text buttons, and it will have a different class. If I show you that one, so you can see that one doesn't say MUI button contain, it says MUI button text. Okay, if I come to the outline, now you see this one says MUI button outline. So you see how it changes. So that's how you become even more specific as to which MUI button you really want to override. So I want to override my contained one. So I'm going to put contain in there, right? And now I am being a little bit more explicit than that. I can actually even say, okay, do I want all of my contained buttons to be overridden by whatever I'm going to put in here, or do I want my primary and my secondary to be each differently by whatever I'm going to add in here? Yeah, I do. I want it to be this way, right? I don't want to add it to, I don't want all, when I do this, I am explicitly overriding my primary button and my secondary button as long as they are contained. That means that my buttons that are my text buttons, my outline buttons, any other button, flat buttons, any other button is not going to be touched. Nothing's going to happen to them. Okay? So it's all going to be only affecting the primary and the secondary button that are contained. That's what makes it super awesome. Okay, so for my contain button, I'm gonna actually going to remove all of this, and I'll explain later why. It's because I am going to be using the theme button, the normal button that comes from the theme, and define the color for it as primary or secondary from the actual HTML. Okay, so but for this purposes, I want to do the background color for this button to be black. There you go. So I can do this. 1, 2, 3, and 3, 6. I can do this, or I can import here a color that contains the black, and then I can just add it just like I did with this. I can do that too, but in this case I'm just gonna do the flat color black. Alright, so that's how you basically do this override for the button. Same way you can do that for the MUI paper, for example, which I am doing that in my website as well. So I'm not gonna go through every single detail. I can delete this now. I'm not gonna go through every single modification of every component and every style for every component, because then we'll be here for a while. So what I'm going to do is, now that I actually explained this and you kind of know how it works already and how to pick it out, I'm going to just add just from the way that I did my website, and I'm gonna add my own here, and then I'll just go over it instead. So just gonna do this, and I'm gonna overwrite this. Okay, so this is basically all the overrides that I'm actually using in my own website. I have the paper. I am using the paper component, which is in here somewhere. This one, just close that. I'm using the paper component, and I want my paper component to be this color as the background, and I want, actually I never did anything to the elevation, so I can just delete that. I don't need it. Okay, the button you already saw me do, and then the toolbar, which I defined my toolbar, which is this right here, to be a min height of 64 pixels, my regular toolbar. Then I have in my typography, I have my colored text secondary to be specifically DC, DC, DC. Okay, so these are the only changes that I'm making. Everything else that I'm making, every other design changes, every other design aspect of the site is already coming directly from MaterialUI out of the box. I think they do a really good job at defining all of these colors and stuff like that, and any other things that I did separately, I just did it at a component level instead of at a theme level. Okay, everything that you're doing here is going to affect the entire theme everywhere on every page. I don't go too crazy with this unless I do want it to affect every page. But if I don't want it to affect every page, if I just want one thing to look different in a single page, then I just make those changes at page level, either by a module CSS or a module SAS, or by using the properties that MaterialUI has provided for us to be able to change our buttons and change our stuff like that according to the page that you want to be in. So like, as you can see, buttons, if you want to use any of these, like the primary one, you just put color primary. If you want to use a secondary one, color secondary. And the theme JS is where you define what is your primary and what is your secondary. We did that right here, primary, secondary. So if I use a button and I call it color primary, it's going to use this color. And if I use my button and I say color secondary, it's going to give me this color. Make sense? All right. So on the next video, we're going to talk about how to inject our first component from MaterialUI. We're probably going to talk about the header instead as the first one. and maybe mess around with it and even add a component module SAS as well, so you can see some of the styles changing at a component level. All right, see you in the next one.